Hello and welcome back to the MLB DFS slate breakdown for Wednesday, September 4th. We're here, we're going to be breaking it down, but before we do, make sure to like and comment to the video and then subscribe to our channel. It helps us a ton. Just keep broadening our reach and being able to give you more and more content for free. Speaking of content, we have a ton of stuff coming out this week with football starting, and with that, you gotta come join us at LineStar, $39.99 per month. Gets you access to everything we do, the props, the DFS, the best ball. You get it all, one low price. Now, let's get into the slate. We're going to go over the perfect lineups. However, I gotta skip the winning lineups because the way that I generally get to them wasn't working for me this morning. So, perfect lineups. We got David Peterson on FanDuel as the pitcher you needed. I talked about him yesterday that I liked him, but I was worried about upside, and how was I wrong about the upside? 11 Ks. The man had 5 Ks through 2 innings yesterday. Absolutely just smoked Boston and brought some people some dubs yesterday. So I hope you guys took him when I talked about him, because if you did, you probably won some money. Hitting wise, perfect lineup. It's all one-offs. It would have been a very hard one to figure out yesterday, but if you did, congrats to you. And then on to DraftKings. We went David Peterson, Carlos Rodon, another pitcher I liked yesterday quite a bit. And then all one-offs once again for the lineup here. So all in all, good night. We had 10 games, and let's get into today for another 10-game slate. And pitching today is pretty awful. So bear with me a little bit here as we go through it because it's ugly. So starting with the highest owned pitcher on the slate, Zach Gallen, 8,400. He's 2x value. He's been pitching really well lately. Just the numbers aren't totally showing it. 4.88 ERA over a 3.3 FIP. So he's been pitching better than the data has actually shown. I like Gallen. There's very few spots today that really look good. Gallen is one of them. However, there are some worrying signs about him as well. He's had 90 plate attempts versus the Giants, and they're hitting 273 off him. Have 170 ISO, 324 WOBA, so they've been decent. Not absolutely crushing, but they've done enough to make it hard for Gallen, and he's only had a couple really good games versus them in his career. Can he do it today? Absolutely. He is one of my favorite pitchers. You just have to, know that there is some worry about his BVP data there. Next, we got Shota. The guy's been good all season. He has struggled a little bit in the back half of the season. Last 5 starts, he has a 4.82 FIP over a FIP of 4 for the season. K rate's been solid. StatCast data is a little worrisome, 41% fly balls, but not that much hard hit, not that much barreled. I don't mind going with Shota, and we are in a situation where the wind is blowing in Pittsburgh today, so I definitely am intrigued with going with some Shota. I think he is one of the better pitchers on this slate. We have him at 2.4x, a real nice value, and second highest owned pitcher at about 20%. Next, another guy at 20%. We got Charlie Morton versus the Colorado Rockies. So obviously it is a decent matchup. However, I do have to bring up the fact that versus righties over the last 20 games, Colorado is hitting 263, 186 ISO, 334 WOBA. So they haven't been too bad. You do have to take into consideration that some of that is in Coors Field, which definitely ups those type of numbers. Now, Colorado is a team that has been very bad when away, and they looked awful yesterday, totally overmatched, but that was against Chris Sale. This is against Charlie Morton. Morton hasn't been great. He has a FIP of 5, a FIP of 5.91 over the last 5, His K rate has been solid, though, and when he gets it going, he can definitely strike a lot of guys out. Now, the thing here is he is high owned, and I don't love chasing high owned Charlie Morton with how volatile he is, and the fact that he has been wild lately. We have 3.6 walks per 9. Gave up 4 last game, 2 the game before that, 2 the game before that. So he's letting a lot of guys on base, and it just depends on if the Rockies can capitalize on that or not. Combined K rate's almost 27% at 88.2K, so you got to consider him a little bit. George Kirby, man, Kirby has been pitching terrible. The last 5 games, 7.07 FIP. His FIP over the last 20 is 3.56. So maybe he, bounced back here, but he is facing a hot Oakland Athletics team that is hitting 280 versus righties over the last 20 games. I don't really know what to do here. I like Kirby's upside, but he's worse away. He's been pitching terribly, and you have Oakland being hot. BVP data favors Oakland as well. I think it's a tough one to really want to pull the trigger on Kirby here, but not many pitchers I like in this slate either, so, I may have to have a little bit of him. Next, we got Sonny Gray versus Milwaukee. He's another pitcher that's been very good all season, but has struggled lately. 5.39 FIP over his last 5. It is against Tampa Bay, Cincinnati, Dodgers, Twins, and Padres, though, all decent hitting teams. And as a whole, 3.85 FIP over his last 20. K rate solid. The one thing with Sonny Gray is he generally doesn't go that many pitches, but he is super efficient, so he still works deep into games. Milwaukee, 205 ISO over the last 20 games, 341 WOBA, so not necessarily an offense I want to pick on. However, I am a little bit intrigued with them. He is a very good pitcher, almost 26% combined K rate on this slate. There's not many pitchers I want to consider, and if I can get a very, very good pitcher at low ownership, I'm intrigued on this slate. Tough matchup, though. Next, we got Yu Darvish. Yu Darvish is back. He is making his first start. He's not coming back from injury. He has been working out the whole time. But I do expect him to be a little bit limited, maybe 85 pitches, 80 pitches, something like that for him today. But it is versus Detroit, who hasn't been very good. And over the last 20 games, striking out a lot, only hitting 233. 170 ISO, 302 WOBA. It's pitcher friendly, San Diego Petco Park. I'm very interested in Darvish. I think he is too cheap for this slate and in a good spot. He may be a little limited, but it doesn't really matter on this slate because, there's only a couple guys that really have much upside to start with. And Darvish can just get it done, frankly, can be very efficient, can go, 6 innings on 80 pitches pretty easily. So I'm in on Darvish. I think he is one of my favorite low-owned plays. And then the next is Bobby Miller, 7.3K, 2.18X. Look, the guy's been pitching awful. Guy's been pitching absolutely awful lately. So I got to throw that out there before I say anything else. 7.28 FIP. Just been getting crushed over his last 5. 4.77 over his last 20. Just hasn't been good this season. Into last year wasn't great, but he has had some very solid games, and I think he is a decent pitcher, but he's still kind of working back into form. Now, I think over the last couple starts, he has started to figure out his form again, and now he's in a very good spot versus the Angels. At a super cheap price with a solid upside, I am intrigued with Bobby Miller. He's going very low owned. He can give us 20 plus, and he's out of value. So I am intrigued on him. One thing I do have to bring up, though, 59% less fantasy points away. Now, maybe it's a little different because they're only traveling like an hour away from Dodger Stadium, but there is warm weather. Winds are blowing out. It is not super friendly for pitching tonight at the Angels Anaheim Stadium. So, but I do like Miller. He is one of the pitchers I'm intrigued on. I will say that I will absolutely also be stacking the Angels in other lineups. I think this is an interesting spot, and it could go either way. But with pitching being so bad, he is definitely a guy that I'm intrigued on. Hayden Birdsong is another value play you could absolutely go to. I'm probably not really going there. The Diamondbacks are hot, but we do have them at a 2.3x value. Again, numbers aren't great, but at least we have seen some upside with him. But I think it's a tough pick for me. Next, we got Tanner Huck versus the Mets. Mets have still been hitting pretty well, pretty hard to want to face them. But at least Tanner Huck is starting to pitch a little bit better again. And if you remember in the beginning of the season, dude was on fire. If he's going back into that form, you might want him at 8.5K. StatCast data looks good. We know there is a little bit of upside. I don't love the spot for him, but at least got to talk about him with this bad of pitching. Now, as far as a real low-owned flyer, I am a little bit intrigued in Seth Lugo. He's better at home. We got a 3.97 FIP over his last 5, 3.3 over his last 20. And then the Guardians just haven't been that good versus righties over the last 20 games. 214 average, 138 ISO, 292 WOBA. Those aren't good numbers. So I'm a little bit intrigued by Seth Lugo, where we know he has decent upside. And nobody's going there. So I'm a bit intrigued with them. Outside of that, I'm kind of out on everybody. I got to bring up Marcus Stroman just because how cheap he is, and he's been pitching well lately, actually. 2.77 FIP over his last 5, and he's somebody you generally don't talk about because upside just isn't there. But on this slate, upside's not really with any of these pitchers. All of them have some sort of flaw or something you're a little worried about. So I think you can get different with pitching a little bit today, even though there's only a handful of guys that I'd really be considering. But Stroman is one. Texas lineup, while they've been hitting a little bit better lately, still hasn't been great versus righties. Over the last 20 games, 252 average, 130 ISO, almost 23% strikeout and 300 WOBA. So I'm a little bit intrigued on Stroman. I wouldn't go overboard with him, but you could do worse. Now let's get over to FanDuel. We got the pitchers for today. The highest owned is Charlie Morton at 37%. I find it very hard to want to jump on a Charlie Morton 40% owned bandwagon. But he is one of the guys in one of the better spots, and we got him at 4.5 star alert score. So there's absolutely reasons to go there. Personally, I would rather go to Shota, who is 9.9K, so only 800 more expensive, but we have met a 10-point higher projection and less ownership. Same alert score. I would much prefer that. We got George Kirby, 11K. With how he's been pitching, I can't pay that, and he's getting ownership. I am probably out on that. I would rather go to Zach Gallen at 9.3K. Similar projection, both as far as LineStar and consensus projections, and similar ownership. Next, we got Sonny Gray, low-owned, Bobby Miller, low-owned, Yu Darvish, low-owned. Those are definitely my 3 pivots I would consider. You could go to Stroman if you want. My issue with Stroman is that 40 points is hard for him to put up, whereas I think the other guys, just have a little more upside, and you may not need to get that different. He's just much more expensive on FanDuel than he is on DraftKings. Bobby Miller is only 6.3K, and I know he is a solid pitcher, and he's had some solid games with solid upside, and he's in a good matchup. So I am fairly intrigued. We have him at 4.6x. He's going super low owned, 5-star alert score. It's an interesting spot. With that being said, definitely still stack some Angels if you're playing multiple lineups, as they could definitely get to him. All in all, I should have probably talked about JP Sears on the other side too on DraftKings, but he's had some decent games. There is some upside. He is average-ish MLB pitcher, but when he gets it rolling, his strikeouts are there. It's versus the Mariners, who frankly are awful versus lefties. 188 average, 150 ISO, 292 WOBA over the last 20 versus lefties. So I think you absolutely can consider JP Sears on both formats. And I do like Darvish, but once again, he's going to have to be efficient today because that quality start bonus is going to be huge on DraftKings. Or on FanDuel, sorry. Now let's look at good old DK and see what we got here. So, getting over to stacks. Highest owned ceiling, we got Oakland. We talked about Kirby. He hasn't been pitching well. Oakland's been hot. Makes some sense to want to go there. Cubs versus Domingo Germán. Germán is not a very good pitcher. Cubs have also been hot. Makes some sense. The one thing there, weather or wind is blowing in, and that definitely knocks the ball down at that stadium quite a bit. Yankees versus Eovaldi. Eovaldi is a very good pitcher. I just don't like this spot for him. That's why we haven't talked about him. Yankees have upside, absolutely. I don't love picking on them, but Eovaldi can get beat up, and Yankees ownership is much too low for their upside. Arizona versus Birdsong makes a ton of sense. They have been hot. Birdsong has a FIP of almost 7 over the last 5 starts. So definitely some intrigue there. And our highest owned stacks, we got the Dodgers. Dodgers far and away in the most interesting hitting situation today. The weather, winds are blowing out. Griffin Canning hasn't been good. It is no surprise whatsoever seeing the Dodgers be this high owned. Now, our highest projected, Dodgers are all over it. Makes a ton of sense to me, as well as the Yankees. And then our highest value play, Arizona and Milwaukee. I think Arizona makes a ton of sense today, and I'm very interested in having that late night hammer with them. Milwaukee versus Sonny Gray. Sonny Gray has been off a little bit, but I don't love trying to pick on him. He still only gives up 2 or 3 runs in bad starts. It's just that's over 5 innings instead of a 7. So I don't love picking on Sonny Gray. Milwaukee at least can score fantasy points in a lot of different ways, and they got some hot hitters, so makes some sense to want to go there. Now, highest implied total, we got the Dodgers at 5.5, Atlanta at 5. We didn't even talk about Atlanta. They're kind of sneaking under the radar. It makes a ton of sense to want to go there. Warmish weather in Atlanta. Blaylock hasn't been great, 4.43 FIP. Bullpen behind him is terrible. Chicago makes a ton of sense at 4.8. Royals, 4.6. Ben Lively is a 5.2 FIP and a 6.12 FIP over his last 5. Definitely want to kind of try and pick on them a bit. Angels and Bobby Miller we have talked about fairly extensively. You know how I feel there. I am interested in that stack, but also interested in Bobby Miller. New York, don't love picking on Eovaldi, but that bullpen behind him is terrible, so there is very, very good upside if they can get to Eovaldi. Boston, Tyler McGill, a little interesting. Mets versus Huck is interesting. And I think Padres are going to go way under or overlooked today versus Montero. Montero, 3.84 FIP over his last 5, but 5.16 over his last 20. And the Padres can just string together hits and string together big innings. So definitely intrigued by them and intrigued by Arizona. Those are my lower owned ones that are probably my 2 favorite. Don't really love everybody below that. However, I got to bring up, if Charlie Morton is super expensive, the Colorado leverage stack makes a lot of sense today. Also, the Giants versus Zach Gallen. They've got the Gallen in the past. I think that makes a ton of sense as well. So good luck today, guys. Let's make some money, and we'll be back tomorrow. Peace.